It was the night the moon bled red over the small town of Raven Hollow, Oregon. The air was still, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Inside a dim wooden house at the edge of town, a woman named Maria Rivera screamed in labor. There was no doctor, no midwife, only the sound of her own echoing cries, bouncing off the peeling walls. The storm outside rattled the windows, but inside, it was colder, unnaturally cold. The candlelight flickered as if struggling to stay alive. Maria's breaths grew shorter, her skin pale from pain and sickness. She had been battling cancer for years, but she refused to die, not until her child was born. When the clock struck 3:33 a.m., the power went out across the town. The moment her baby's first cry filled the air, the lights flickered once more, then shattered. Every mirror in the house cracked at the same time, and a deep gust of icy wind swept through the room. Maria froze. In the corner, she saw it. A shadow, tall and fluid, moving against the wall though nothing was there to cast it. It hovered near the crib, whispering words in a language she didn't understand. The baby stopped crying, staring straight up at the ceiling with wide, silent eyes. Outside, dogs barked and wind chimes screamed. The blood moon cast its red light through the window, painting everything in crimson. Maria whispered a prayer, clutching her child close. But deep inside, she already knew something unnatural had entered this world with her daughter. The shadow lingered only a moment longer, then melted into the darkness. The baby exhaled softly, her tiny breath visible in the freezing air. That was the night Lena Rivera was born, and Raven Hollow's curse began. Years passed after Lena's birth, but the house in Raven Hollow never felt alive again. The light rarely stayed on for long, and a strange, cold silence settled over its wooden walls. Maria Rivera, once strong and full of hope, now spent her days between sickness and fear. The cancer had spread. The doctors stopped visiting long ago, and neighbors avoided the house completely. Maria's body was weakening, but it was her eyes that told the real story, hollow, sleepless, and haunted. Every night she would wake drenched in sweat, whispering, "Don't take her. Please don't take her," as if pleading with someone unseen. Sometimes, Lena would wake up in the middle of the night to see her mother talking softly into the corner of the room, where the shadows always seemed thicker. The townspeople said the house was cursed. Mailmen refused to deliver there after sundown. Children crossed the street rather than walk past. And yet, despite the fear, Maria refused to leave. "This house," she said weakly, "is where she belongs. It protects her." But Lena, now 7 years old, felt things that words couldn't explain. Toys moved on their own. Windows opened when there was no wind. And sometimes, when she looked into a mirror, she saw a flicker, not of herself, but of something watching back. Maria grew weaker with every sunrise. The illness ate away at her body, but her love for Lena kept her breathing. Still, she knew the truth she could never tell her daughter, the thing she had done to save her unborn child, the promise she made under the red moon. And somewhere deep inside the shadows of that house, something was waiting to collect on that promise. The Rivera home stood at the very edge of Raven Hollow, hidden behind overgrown trees and rusted gates. It was the kind of place people avoided, the kind that made you lower your voice when you passed by. Inside, the air was always cold, even in summer. The smell of old medicine, wilted flowers, and damp wood filled every corner. Lena had learned early on that their house was different. It made sounds at night, soft footsteps in the hallway, doors creaking open, the faint hum of someone breathing when no one was there. Sometimes, she'd hear whispering from the vents, voices calling her name, slow and calm, like lullabies from the dark. Maria pretended not to hear. "It's just the house settling," she would say with a weak smile, her hands trembling as she held her cup of tea. But when Lena looked closely, she could see the fear behind her mother's eyes. The mirrors in the house were covered with sheets. Maria said it was because they invited the wrong kind of attention. But Lena remembered once, just once, she lifted a sheet to peek. What she saw wasn't her reflection. It was her mother, standing behind her, crying silently, even though her mother was actually asleep in the other room. At night, Maria prayed. At dawn, she coughed blood. And every sunset, the same thing happened. The shadows in the hallway would grow longer, reaching closer to the bedroom where Lena slept. The neighbors said they sometimes saw a faint red light through the windows at 3 a.m., followed by a child's laughter. No one dared investigate. To everyone else, the Rivera house was haunted. To Lena, it was home, the only one she had ever known. It was the middle of autumn when Maria's condition worsened. The mornings grew darker and the air heavier inside the old house. Lena, now 10 years old, spent most of her days by her mother's side, helping her sit up, feeding her soup, and brushing her hair that had begun to fall in fragile strands. Maria barely spoke anymore. Her skin was pale and thin like paper, and her voice a trembling whisper. "Promise me," she would say. "If anything happens to me, don't look into the mirror." Lena didn't understand, but she nodded. That evening, the sky turned strange. Clouds moved fast, swallowing the sun before it could set. The whole town seemed to fall under a dim, gray haze. Even the birds stopped singing. Inside the Rivera house, every light flickered, not once, but again and again, until the living room lamp exploded, scattering glass across the floor. Lena screamed, rushing to her mother's room. Maria was shaking uncontrollably, whispering something in Spanish, prayers, curses, maybe both. "They're here," she gasped. "They're watching." When the clock hit 3:33 p.m., the power went out. The entire town of Raven Hollow fell silent. Not a single machine buzzed. No wind blew. Just stillness, thick and unnatural. Lena peeked out the window. Across the street, she saw a dark shape standing still. It looked like a man, but taller, thinner, and wrong. Its head tilted slowly, almost curiously, before melting into the fog. The moment it disappeared, Maria cried out, "Don't let them take you." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shadow from the window, and behind it, something whispering her name from the darkness. The next morning, Maria's health collapsed completely. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold. Lena begged her mother to let her call for help, but Maria grabbed her hand tightly, whispering, "No one will come, mi amor. They never do." Still, Lena ran. She ran barefoot through the dirt road, her little heart pounding against her chest. She went from house to house, knocking, crying, pleading, "Please. My mom is dying. Please help." But every door closed. Curtains were drawn. She could hear whispers inside the houses, fearful voices saying, "Don't open it. It's the cursed child." At the last house, a man opened the door just long enough to look down at her, disgusted. "Go away," he said sharply. "You and your mother brought this on yourselves." He slammed the door before she could speak again. Lena froze on the porch, tears streaming down her cheeks. The wind grew cold around her. She felt a strange pulse in her chest, slow, heavy, almost like another heartbeat that wasn't hers. She turned back toward her house. The world around her seemed different, quieter, grayer. The trees leaned, their branches creaking as if whispering. The road behind her disappeared into mist. When she stepped back inside, she instantly knew. The air was still. Her mother's room was colder than ever. Maria lay on the bed, eyes open, but there was no life left in them. Lena fell to her knees, shaking her mother's shoulders, begging her to wake up. But Maria was gone. And then it came, the sound. A low hum, deep and vibrating through the walls. The mirror above the dresser cracked. The reflection of the room shifted, and for the first time, Lena saw it. A shadow standing behind her. The scream that came out of Lena's mouth wasn't hers. It echoed through the entire neighborhood, rattling windows and waking the dead silence of Raven Hollow. Lights burst, glass shattered, and every dog in town started barking at once. Inside the Rivera house, the temperature dropped to freezing. The curtains fluttered even though the windows were shut tight. Maria's body remained still on the bed, but her eyes, still open, seemed to be staring straight at her daughter. Lena felt something move inside her, not just emotion, but a weight, a pulse, a second heartbeat. It wasn't grief alone, it was awakening. The air around her shimmered, bending the light. Her small hands trembled as her reflection in the cracked mirror began to move on its own. The reflection smiled, but Lena didn't. It whispered, a voice not from this world, layered, deep, ancient. "You called for help," it said. "Now they will answer." The floorboards creaked as invisible footsteps circled the room. The mirror cracked again, spreading like veins across glass. The shadow from the corner stretched, crawling up the wall like liquid darkness. Lena stumbled back, terrified, tears running down her face. "Please," she whispered, "bring her back." The reflection tilted its head, still smiling. "They never helped your mother," it hissed. "Now, we will help you." Lightning flashed outside, though the sky was clear. Every bulb in the house exploded. The mirror shattered completely, and a surge of red light erupted from it. When it faded, Lena was standing in silence, eyes glowing faint white. Something inside her had changed forever. That night, the daughter of the Jinn truly awakened. The first night after Maria's burial, Raven Hollow slept uneasily. The air was heavy, thick with fog, and the crickets had gone silent. Only one house had its lights on, the home of Mr. Dalton, the same man who had slammed his door in little Lena's face. Inside, he sat in his recliner, drinking bourbon, pretending not to remember the crying child he had turned away. But every time he blinked, he saw her, standing outside his door, eyes hollow, lips trembling. Guilt tried to speak in his chest, but pride crushed it down. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the lights flickered. The air conditioner went dead. His TV turned on by itself, static. Then, a voice whispered through it. Soft, childlike. "You didn't help her." He froze. "Who's there?" he barked, grabbing his shotgun. But the air in the room grew colder. Frost formed on his glass. He turned toward the hallway and saw small wet footprints leading toward his bedroom. Dalton followed them, breath shallow. The door creaked open, and inside, the room was dark except for the faint glow of the mirror. In the reflection, he saw a little girl. Her head tilted, her eyes glowing white. "You close the door," she whispered, voice trembling between grief and rage. Before Dalton could move, the reflection moved on its own, stepping out of the mirror. Her face twisted, not human anymore. The lights burst, the air screamed. By dawn, the police found Dalton's body slumped in his chair, eyes wide open, face pale with terror. His mirror was cracked from edge to edge, and written across the glass, in shaky, childlike handwriting, "You should have helped her." After that night, things in Raven Hollow began to change. One by one, those who had ignored Maria, who had turned away when Lena begged for help, started disappearing. It began with whispers. People claimed to see a child in white standing at the edge of the woods, barefoot, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Sometimes she'd appear in mirrors, behind someone brushing their teeth or closing a closet door. At first, the townspeople thought it was just ghost stories, but the fear grew when 3 people vanished in a single week. Sheriff Coleman led the investigation. "We're dealing with a lunatic," he told the press. "Probably some cult thing." But deep down, the sheriff knew. He had seen something too. The night before Dalton's death, he'd found his radio full of whispers, a child's voice humming softly through static. That same voice came again as he drove down Maple Street one foggy morning. "Sheriff," the voice said, giggling faintly, "do you believe in monsters?" He slammed on the brakes. A small figure stood in the middle of the road. The girl, pale, barefoot, eyes glowing white. He blinked, and she was gone. The fog thickened, wrapping around his car like hands. When he turned his headlights back on, his own reflection in the rearview mirror was smiling, but he wasn't. By sunrise, the sheriff's patrol car was found empty in the woods, the engine still running. His hat lay beside a puddle of melted glass. Raven Hollow stopped sleeping after that. People boarded up windows, burned their mirrors, and prayed. But every now and then, someone would still hear her whisper, "You didn't help her." Raven Hollow had turned into a ghost town. Shops stayed closed, schools shut down, and no one dared go out after sunset. The streets were empty, except for the sound of footsteps that didn't belong to anyone living. Every mirror in town was covered, but it didn't matter. The reflection found its way through puddles, windows, even metal surfaces. People said the Jinn child could appear anywhere light touched glass. Lena, or what she had become, now moved between worlds. Half human, half shadow. Her eyes glowed faint gold when the moonlight hit them. She didn't walk like a human anymore. She drifted, silent and cold, her long hair flowing as if underwater. Some nights, she would stand outside people's houses, just staring, watching. Those who saw her face would vanish within days. But there was one exception, Eleanor, an old nurse who had once tried to help Maria years ago. Eleanor had left town long ago, but returned when she heard what was happening. "That girl needs peace," she said, holding her cross tightly. She went to the Rivera house, the old, abandoned place no one dared enter. The front door creaked open as if waiting for her. Inside, dust hung in the air like fog. The mirrors were shattered, furniture overturned. The scent of burnt roses filled the room. Eleanor called out softly, "Lena? Sweetheart, I'm here to help you." A whisper came back, "You're too late." The air shimmered, and Lena appeared in front of her, eyes glowing, face unreadable. "They never helped her," she said. Eleanor held out her cross, trembling. "Child, forgive them. Forgive yourself." But Lena just smiled, a sad, broken smile, before fading into mist. The house fell silent again. Only the mirrors cracked, one by one, echoing her rage. By winter, Raven Hollow had become a cursed place. The fog no longer lifted, and no birds dared fly over it. The government sealed the town's borders, calling it a toxic zone. But people whispered the truth, that the Jinn's daughter was still there, walking in the ruins. Father Benjamin, an old priest from nearby Salem, arrived after hearing the stories. A scholar of the occult, he believed no demon was born evil, that every spirit began as pain. He entered Raven Hollow at dawn, Bible in one hand and an old Arabic scroll in the other. The scroll spoke of Al-Bint al-Jinn, a child of both worlds, created by grief, bound to vengeance. The prophecy said, "When the mother dies in sorrow, the child shall awaken between life and flame. Only through forgiveness can her fire be quenched." Father Benjamin set up his altar in the town's ruined church, the same church where Maria once prayed. As he began to chant the rites, mirrors all around the sanctuary started trembling. The candles dimmed. Then came a voice, soft and broken, like a child crying through walls. Why did no one help her? The priest's heart pounded. "Child," he said gently, "you must find peace. Your mother would not want this." But the walls bled shadow. The cross fell from the altar, and for the first time, Lena appeared before him, eyes burning with cold fire. "You talk of peace," she whispered, "but you did not come when she was dying." The church windows shattered in one violent gust of wind. When morning came, Father Benjamin was found kneeling at the altar, eyes open, lips frozen mid-prayer. On the walls, burned into stone, were 3 words. No forgiveness left. After Father Benjamin's death, Raven Hollow descended into chaos. The few survivors who hadn't fled now gathered at the town's center, desperate for escape. But every road out of town had disappeared, covered in mist so thick it swallowed headlights. Panic turned to violence. Some blamed the curse, others each other. Houses were set on fire in madness, as if burning their homes could burn the evil away. That night, the fire spread, a crimson wave devouring street after street. The sky turned orange and black, filled with screaming ash. And through that inferno, she walked. Lena, or the spirit she had become, glided through the smoke, untouched by the flames. Her white dress turned dark with soot, her hair rising like smoke around her. Each step she took left scorched footprints on the ground. Those who looked into her glowing eyes were consumed, not by fire, but by memories of their own cruelty. They screamed not from burns, but from guilt. The fire fed on that guilt, growing stronger. At the center of the chaos stood Eleanor, the old nurse. She clutched her Bible, screaming, "Lena, stop. Your mother would never want this." The child stopped. For a heartbeat, her eyes softened. The wind shifted. Then a whisper echoed from the flames, Maria's voice. "Lena, my love, let me rest." For the first time, Lena fell to her knees. The fire dimmed slightly, and the town held its breath. But then, another voice, darker, ancient, spoke from the shadows. "Too late. She belongs to us now." The flames roared back to life, twisting into the shape of a face, monstrous and divine. The Jinn had come to claim his daughter. The few who survived the inferno hid inside the old town hall. Among them was Eleanor, clutching Father Benjamin's burnt scroll. The prophecy had one final line no one had noticed before, written in Arabic, half-faded. "The child may be sealed through reflection, her rage bound where her grief began." That meant one thing, the mirror. The same mirror where Lena first saw her other self. Eleanor gathered what courage she had left and led a small group back to the Rivera house, now half-burned, its windows glowing with unnatural light. Inside, the mirror still stood cracked but whole enough to reflect movement. They formed a circle around it, chanting the priest's words, mixing prayer with Arabic verses. The air turned heavy, electric. Then she appeared. Lena materialized behind the mirror, her reflection smiling while her real face cried. "Why do you keep trying to save me?" she asked. "You all left her to die." Eleanor raised her cross. "Because I didn't leave. And neither did God." The reflection twisted, its smile fading. The mirror began to hum. Deep, resonant, shaking the floor. Shadows crawled along the walls, forming faces of those who had vanished. Lena screamed, a sound that shook the earth itself. Her body split between light and darkness. Her hands pressed to the glass as if fighting herself. "Go back," Eleanor shouted. "Go home to her." The mirror cracked, once, twice, then shattered completely. A blast of light erupted through the house, blowing out every window. When it was over, the mirror was gone. So was Lena. Only one thing remained on the wall, written in ash. "She is finally free." When the explosion of light faded, Raven Hollow was silent for the first time in months. The fires were gone. The fog had lifted. The streets lay in ruins, but peaceful, like a storm had finally passed. Eleanor woke up among the ashes of the Rivera house. Her ears rang, her skin burned, but she was alive. Around her, the survivors began to emerge, disoriented, coughing, but breathing. The cursed whispers that had haunted the town were gone. The air felt lighter, the sky bluer. For the first time, sunlight touched the street where no light had reached since Maria's death. Eleanor walked through the remains of the Rivera home, whispering a prayer for Maria and Lena. On the cracked wall, where the mirror once hung, she saw faint writing in soot, childlike handwriting. "Thank you." Tears filled her eyes. For a moment, she thought she heard laughter, soft, like a little girl playing outside. But when she turned, no one was there. Over the following weeks, news spread that the Raven Hollow curse had ended. Scientists and reporters arrived, trying to explain it. They blamed gas leaks, toxic smoke, and hallucinations. But the locals knew better. At night, the few who stayed behind said they could still feel warmth around the Rivera house, as if someone small and gentle watched over them. Eleanor left a single candle by the old gate every evening. She would whisper, "Sleep in peace, child." And when the wind passed through the trees, she sometimes heard it whisper back, "I'm home now." But somewhere deep underground, under the ashes and roots, something stirred faintly. A shimmer of glass, a flicker of reflection, and a single wide eye opened for just a second. A year later, Raven Hollow was rebuilt. Families returned, new people moved in, and the tragedy became a story told to tourists, the ghost town that came back. Eleanor, now frail and older, lived in a small cottage on the hill overlooking the town. Her house was filled with sunlight, prayer candles, and photos of Maria and young Lena that she had rescued from the ruins. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned orange, Eleanor's granddaughter, Sophie, visited. "Grandma," she asked, "is it true that there was a ghost girl here?" Eleanor smiled softly. There was once a girl who loved her mother so much. She broke the veil between worlds. Sophie giggled. "That's scary." "Love always is," Eleanor whispered. Later that night, after Sophie went to bed, Eleanor walked to her old dresser. The mirror on it had a long crack running through the middle, a piece from the Rivera house she had kept, as a reminder. She touched the glass gently. "You're at peace now," she murmured. The room stayed still for a few moments. Then, slowly, fog began to gather around the mirror's edges. Eleanor froze. The reflection behind her began to shift, showing not her small bedroom, but the old Rivera house, glowing faintly red. And in the center of the reflection stood Lena, older now, calm, her eyes human again. "Thank you," the reflection whispered. Eleanor smiled through tears. "Go to her," she said softly. Lena nodded once. Then, her image faded like smoke in sunlight. The mirror cleared again. The crack in the glass sealed itself, leaving a perfect reflection. And for the first time since Raven Hollow's fall, the world outside was completely still. Months passed. The story of Raven Hollow became a legend across the United States. Podcasts, documentaries, and horror YouTubers covered it endlessly. The town of the Mirror Child. Tourists visited the site, taking photos near the burned church, the cemetery, and the Rivera ruins. But locals warned them, don't look too long into any reflection here. One popular streamer named Jake Carter came one October night to film a live ghost hunt. Laughing into his camera, he said, "All right, guys, this is where they say the Jinn girl appeared. Let's see if the stories are real." He entered the Rivera ruins, his flashlight cutting through dust. On the wall, where the mirror once hung, was only darkness. But when he pointed his light at it, a faint shape appeared, like glass reforming. Viewers flooded the chat with messages. "Bro, something's behind you. Look at the wall. OMG, her eyes." Jake turned, laughing, until he saw her. A pale girl standing just inches behind him. Barefoot, silent, her eyes glowing faint white. The stream went black. The next morning, police found Jake's camera. The last frame showed his terrified face reflected in something shiny, though there was no mirror in that room. Raven Hollow was sealed off again. No one entered after that. And on dark nights, when fog rolls across the town, people say you can still hear a little girl's voice, singing softly through broken glass. They never helped her. This was the story of Lena, the daughter of the Jinn. Born from sorrow, raised by silence, and remembered by the echoes of revenge. If you want more haunting tales like this, subscribe, like, and turn on the bell before the lights go out.